Welcome into the Autzen Audibles podcast. I'm Matt Prehm, Erik, Skopil, John Evans on the show. Welcome to a first three-man, I think, with us three together.
Yeah.
Ever. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Preview, Oregon, Minnesota, Friday night, 6 o'clock. Games on Fox. Jason Benetti, Robert Griffin III will be on the call. Home game, Oregon coming off a short week. It's another game where weather could be a factor, although, guys, knock on wood here for a second. I checked weather app this morning, and it looks now like Friday could be dry. It might not be.
I saw rain in the morning and then hopefully clear for the game on Friday night.
Yeah, so maybe that impacts things a little bit, but where are we at from a headspace of just kind of where this team's at going into the final 3-game stretch of the season? 3 winnable games. Starts with Minnesota. I think they're like a 20, 21 point favorite, which is a pretty high number. But you look at Oregon's roster, they should theoretically, at least on both sides of the football, let's maybe start offensively. Even with the injuries, even with the uncertainty of who's playing, they should theoretically still have the firepower to kind of outclass the Gophers if they show up.
Line's moved to 25.5, Matt.
Wow.
So, I know, I agree. And of the last 3 games, to me, this is clearly the most winnable. That sounds like they're not going to win the other games, but this is the game with like the highest percentage that they're going to win and win big. This will be the largest spread, I think, pretty clearly. It'll be interesting to see what USC is coming here and what Oregon, Washington, and Seattle looks like. But Minnesota's an interesting team defensively. I think this is one of the bigger tests Oregon is going to have from like a defensive line personnel perspective and a front 7. I'm not saying it's as good as Indiana, Penn State, probably not as good as Iowa, but there's some like real dudes up front. Anthony Smith is among the leaders in the conference in sacks and tackles for loss. As a unit, they're right at the top of the Big Ten sack leaderboard. They have 32 in 9 games, so they get after it a little bit. The fact that the weather might be clear makes me curious to see like what's the Dante Moore impact in this game. Are they able to throw the ball around? Do they have the personnel? Who plays is a huge question here. Like, I think we all anticipate that 25.5 points feels reasonable and that Oregon will either cover or get close. Like, I don't think any of us are concerned about the outcome. I think the Ducks are going to win their 10th game of the year, 10th game of the year. I've got so far into the season, guys. I apologize for being completely wrong headspace. Yeah. At the same time, I guess I'm really fascinated by just how the offense actually looks and operates based upon expectation. Because I kind of think of this game a little bit like the Rutgers game, where you're in the middle of the schedule here, and it's going to be tough sledding against Iowa on offense. You obviously already had been tough sledding against Indiana. You need kind of that bounce back game. This kind of falls in the schedule here where in the ramp up to USC, I think you'd like to see things look a little different than they have against Iowa and a little different than they looked against Wisconsin. And I'm just curious to see how they achieve that. Running on this Minnesota defense may be a little more difficult than people anticipate. I still think I'm not going to doubt Oregon's ability to run the football coming out of the Iowa game because we all know Iowa's defensive front is really good too. And the expectation is Oregon was not going to go for 261 in that game. But I'm just curious to see what the pass offense looks like. I think that's my biggest point of curiosity entering a game that, while it is a short week for Oregon and Minnesota has a lot more time to prep, Duck fans, that feels like that's been the trend all year. I do think Oregon will look perfectly fine in this game. I'm just interested to see how much pass success they have because that will matter a lot in the following 2 weeks.
Yeah, because I feel like they were able to find a bit of an identity over the past, especially during that Iowa game in the second half, and then in the Wisconsin game, running the football, doing that 12 personnel, the 21 personnel. We hear Dante Moore talk about how much he liked working out of that, and it's become a necessity a little bit with the depth at receiver at times now. So I think it's going to be interesting to see if can you build that pass game off of that run game? Can you work those play action shots and be able to unlock some guys like Malik Benson and open some things up with this pass game that we saw early in the year, but also maintain that physicality? Because I think that's going to be your path to beating Minnesota. Minnesota they're a team that's defended well against the pass, against the run this year. They're a team that beats the teams they're supposed to beat. That's what they've done so far. But yeah, if you can unlock some of those, I think the play actions, the area you can hit some deep shots over the top, because I think you got like a guy like Coy Parrish on the back ends of this Minnesota defense. He's a very good athlete, but can get a little bit undisciplined at times. If you can, catch him in rotation or something like that. Dante Moore's got the arm. I think he talked about, accepting that he's had to take a little bit of a smaller role, even as he got injured, but just because of kind of the game script of some of these games recently. But I think he'll be looking to open it up, and I think this is a team that you can definitely do that against if you get some clear weather on Friday night.
You're on mute, Matt.
Sorry. If the weather doesn't force Oregon to have to run the ball consistently like it did against Iowa and like it did against Wisconsin, then I don't have a ton of fear in Oregon for some reason having an inability to move the football with a balanced offense. Even with the injuries, even if Gary Bryant Jr. doesn't play and De'Corian Moore and Kenyon Sadiq don't play, I still feel like a Malik Benson, Jeremiah McClellan, Jamari Johnson kind of trio can effectively get downfield, create the explosives, and loosen up the defense for the run game to see Noah Whittington and De'Aaron Hill and Jordan Davidson kind of do their thing. And then when we had Ryan Burns on of Gopher Illustrated earlier this week, we asked him about what is this these two teams, Minnesota's two different teams, home and away, and they haven't lost when they're at home, and they haven't won when they're on the road this season. And you look at their stats defensively at home, they're averaging 14 points allowed per game, and that number more than doubles when they go on the road to 33 points per game. That's a massive number. Granted, some of that is because they played Ohio State, the number one team in the country. They scored 42 points. Ohio State did in this game. But I just wonder how is this Minnesota team going to handle the atmosphere? It's a Friday night. It's the first Friday night. It's the first night game at Autzen this season. That's going to create some dynamic there with the fan base. They're going to be a little extra juiced up for this one. And I don't know. As long as the weather holds and it stays relatively clear, I don't have a lot of fear in Oregon not being able to move the football. Now, because of Minnesota, it could be lack of execution. It could be lack of guys having chemistry on the field together. But I don't think it's going to be because Minnesota stops Oregon routinely. And even their run defense is solid. I know I expect Oregon to have maybe some difficulty running the football, but even then, even if Harkey's not able to play, I just think this team they figured something out. I think the bully ball mentality kind of gave them maybe some added confidence from Iowa, and will that carry over into this one?
I was watching Jeff Schwartz's Ducks Rising film breakdown last night, and he, of course, is a former offensive lineman and is very knowledgeable in that aspect of the game. And he was really complimentary, and the breakdowns were certainly very complimentary of what Oregon's front did against Iowa. And I think coming off of that, there is such thing as momentum and confidence from game to game. And not that Oregon's offensive line has been poor at points this season, but I think they're coming off of arguably their best game of the year. And they're doing, and I think the fact they did it with Janoris, who looked like he belonged, was super encouraging. But especially the left side, they played extremely well, and Poncho played extremely well. And just the way these guys were able to get after it and maul some pretty high-end defensive front players for the Hawkeyes. I don't know if I'm even – I guess I'm going to be surprised if over the last three games, Oregon really has a hard time running the football once.
Yeah, the strength of this run game really comes from the interior. It comes from Poncho and Prehm on the inside on those double teams that they work. Those guys, and you could see that size advantage they had over Minnesota's D-line. That's why I asked Dan about it, because those guys were all coming in around 295, and Poncho and Prehm are both, and Iuli are all 330. And when they were getting into those guys on the inside, they were able to move them. And you got big holes for these guys, Davison, Hill, Whittington up the middle, that they can, even when you're running up the middle, you can get these 10+ yard explosive runs.
And Minnesota, I think, is a little bigger pound for pound, body for body on the defensive line, by the way. But and they have been like, this is the number 5 rush defense in the Big Ten, 108 yards per game allowed. This is a solid defense just in general. The number 7 defense in the Big Ten, averaging just over 300 yards per game allowed. They also really had a hard time, to Matt's point, on the road against both Iowa, against Ohio State, against Cal in those 3 losses. I mean, it's really it's fascinating when you look up and see a 6-0 home split, 0-3 road split. And this game is played at Autzen Stadium, a place that's as difficult to play as any of those places, having now been at all 3 of those stadiums. I mean, Matt and I know Cal's not exactly a difficult place to play most of the time. Kinnick and Columbus and Iowa City certainly are difficult places to play. But I think Autzen's right up there with them. And I feel like there's no question in my mind that, and I guess it's kind of strange that we're talking about a defense struggling to travel well, but that's been an issue for Minnesota this year. And I have confidence, probably almost more of an issue just because of personnel of who they're playing, but I have confidence Oregon's going to have enough offensive success. And I guess I'm wondering, maybe a question to John and then to Matt, and there will be a prop kind of on this later, so spoilers. Do we think Dante Moore gets back on track? Because you look at what he did, like his production in Big Ten play, I don't know if we've glossed over it or if it's just been kind of an underlying thing that we've all been aware of, hasn't been anywhere near as impressive. Like you look at, if you take away that Rutgers game, and I'm not saying that game doesn't count for any, that's not how football works, but outside of that performance and the Penn State game, I guess in parts, but in the totality, it wasn't extremely, extremely statistically impressive. We haven't really seen a big production game in Big Ten play. And I know weather's played a factor. Playing Indiana's defense has played a factor. I just have a sneaking suspicion that even though there's guys missing, this could be a game where we look up and go, okay, here's Dante, he's back. And that final 2-minute drill, which was kind of wild. It was his first of his entire college, or his whole football career, first time leading a 2-minute drill to win a game. I just think that could maybe kind of spark something there, even though he's going to be missing a lot of guys around him.
Yeah, I mean, I look at the 2 best quarterbacks that this Minnesota's team has played this season in Julian Sand from Ohio State and JKS, the Oregon transfer at Cal now, the true freshman. And those guys combined 600 yards, 6 touchdowns against this team, and both were able to just move the ball like efficiently, like high yards per attempt. I think this is certainly a game that Dante could bounce back in. And I think just because he's been beat up recently, I think this is just a spot where he could kind of want that to find the momentum as we head towards the final stretch of the season.
How much does this defense need, or not this defense, this Oregon offense, and maybe like from a playoff ranking perspective, from a narrative perspective, need a game where they're balanced again, or maybe not necessarily balanced, but the passing attack is clicking and they show the explosives and they show the quick strike mentality that they saw. Like Dante Moore referenced it early in the this week when he said, like, earlier in the year you saw us slinging it around, we were 4 wide, we were throwing the ball all over the place. And he said now, like, some of the weather's dictated it, some of the game plans dictated it, some of the availability has dictated it. We're not doing that as often. I'm just kind of like, it seems like everyone's kind of poking holes into Oregon's resume. Some of it fair, some of it maybe not. The last couple of weeks, like, Oregon was a very popular upset pick for that game at Iowa from the national media. And I'm just wondering, like, you string together some ugly wins and a loss, and you don't really look clean, that kind of creates maybe this idea that you're not as good as you once were or can be. And maybe this offense just really needs a game where they can just really let it rip through the air to show everybody, to show themselves maybe even a little bit that, yeah, like, this team still hasn't taken a big step back offensively. It's just been weather dependent and roster availability dependent.
Yeah, we're like mind melded on that, Matt. That's exactly where my head's coming into this. Is like, this feels like the get that off your back week against Minnesota. The narrative has been the narrative. This is a defense, to John's point too. And Parrish is an interesting guy because I remember going into the year, I think he was like one of the 3 best PFF graded defensive players in the whole schedule. This is a All-American caliber player.
Yeah, he was really good last year for them.
And it's interesting that he's kind of had a hard time in Minnesota in general against the pass, has been not very good. This just feels like a moment for Dante and the offense to kind of click and get things right.
I think because this offense is at its best when it has those explosive moments. When it's at its best when it can be balanced, like you said, work the powerful run that they have, and then have those explosive moments. Because the more powerful you are on the inside, the more you're going to be able to open things up to go over the top. And then if you're threatening teams over the top, then you can force them to put 2 safeties back there and then run against them again. We've seen it at times against teams like Rutgers, where they were just moving the ball, dominating against them. I think there is a chance for that. Minnesota is definitely better than Rutgers, but overall, I think this is a very good spot, like you said, to be kind of get that bounce back and kind of just get some of those reps that you're going to need later in the season, just throwing the football around, because you're going to have to pass in some of these situations in December and January. And Dante Moore just really hasn't had to drop back and straight up do that in almost a month, it feels like.
We want to shift over to the defensive side of the football.
Yeah,
it feels like an opportunity where Oregon's going to play a Minnesota offense that their quarterback is solid. Drake Lindsley, he's a freshman, 10 total touchdowns, 6 interceptions. It's not a high number. Completes over 62% of his passes, 30 attempts per game. That's a solid number. But his yards per attempt is really low, 6.3 yards per attempt. This feels like an offense that they don't really want their quarterback to put the ball in jeopardy. Don't make a mistake. Get the ball out quick. Let your other guys do the damage. And that feels like a space where Oregon could attack and try to make mistakes and try to break the game open by forcing this guy to do more than what's expected or asked of him.
Yeah, the splits are telling here for Lindsey, who, again, redshirt freshman, has the size, 6'5", 230, has, I think, some pretty high-end arm talent, too. Was a 3-star prospect out of Arkansas who's maybe kind of like overachieved expectation this early at least. But I was looking at it, non-conference play played really well. And then in that Big Ten debut against Rutgers, I'm sure people in Minneapolis are feeling really good about what they had here. He completed 75.6% of passes, 324 yards, 0 interceptions, and 3 touchdowns. Just like an excellent debut to start Big Ten play. And since then, it hasn't been anywhere near as good. Completing less than 60% of his passes, 157 yards. He's thrown 4 interceptions to 3 touchdowns, and a really, really subpar performance against Iowa. That's the game that, and I think Ryan Burns came on from our sister Minnesota site and really kind of said the same thing. That was the one where you went, ooh, that just didn't feel in line with what they had seen from him all season. So Oregon's pass defense is well documented. It's as good as anybody in the country. Statistically, it is the best in the country. Lowest yards per game allowed, worst opposing quarterback rating. They create a lot of deflected passes. They don't give up many big plays. When they do give up big plays, they feel like they come in inopportune moments, largely just because of coverage busts or people making I'm still perplexed having rewatched some of the Iowa game, what exactly both Dylan and Flowers were thinking on the 40-yard third down completion.
Yeah, I still don't know.
It seemed like there was just complete confusion there. But in general, this is an Oregon defense that we know is really good against the pass. And if this becomes a game where Minnesota is reliant on Drake Lindsley, a young quarterback on the road, in a matchup where there's a little bit of an overmatched athleticism kind of component to it, that doesn't seem like a very good recipe for Minnesota to have much success. It really feels to me like if Minnesota is going to hang around and make this game interesting, it's going to be what Matt said earlier, execution for Oregon is just not up to standard and it's bad. And they kind of shoot themselves in the foot and allow the Gophers to hang around. Or it's this young quarterback just has an out-of-body experience and just rips the ball around the field, has a bunch of success. Normally, I guess most years I would be wary of that, because how many times, Matt, have we seen that covering Oregon over the years of a quarterback comes in and just plays out of his gourd and suddenly the game's more interesting.
Absolutely. I mean, it's not just an Oregon football thing. It's an Oregon sports thing. How many times have we seen Oregon basketball play a team just shoot the lights out and they're a horrific shooting team, or a baseball team just gets hammered because they play a team that suddenly figures out how to hit the baseball. That's a very common occurrence from a football team to run it, or feels like a kicker thing for Oregon. Like,
oh boy,
everyone else until this past weekend. Shout out to Atticus Sappington. It's like every previous game, Oregon plays a team, and it's like, oh, they have a kicker. That's great. How come Oregon can't have that?
But I do think my point is like this feels like a different year where Oregon secondary has just locked down every. I mean, there's not been a pass offense that's really succeeded anywhere near its routine. And even Fernando Mendoza, if you go back and look at it, had a subpar day statistically by his standards. So it's going to have to be Drake Lindsey putting this team on his back, I think, to a certain degree. I have some thoughts on the run game, but I'll let John talk on kind of some of the pass defense or some Drake stuff if he's got thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I even think to a game like this Rutgers game a couple of weeks ago where we talked about the Rutgers pass game, Callie McManus and their receivers, and that was a pass game that has been better than what Minnesota has done even throughout most of the season. And Oregon went out there less than 50% completion, less than 100 yards on the day for Callie McManus. Yeah, like you said, the secondary is the strength of this defense for sure. I mean, but Brandon Finney looks like an All-American at corner as a true freshman, and you got Thieneman and some other guys back there. It's really strong, and I think that you can there's a very solid chance that Oregon limits, especially a guy in Lindsey who is young, who we've seen him make mistakes in games like Iowa. If you can get pressure on him, make him confused, make him feel rushed in the pocket, I think you could force him into a couple of turnovers and hold him below 150 passing yards and really shut down what Minnesota can do through the air.
Ryan, when we had him on, really stressed the inability to stretch the field.
Yep.
For Minnesota. And that feels like an opportunity where when you've got Ife Obadegwu, you've got Brandon Finney on both sides of the field at cornerback and the guys that will come in behind them. And then you got Dylan Thieneman kind of in the middle, kind of the hybrid linebacker safety role and whatnot. Flowers back there doing his thing. You can really load the box and almost force Minnesota to try and throw into these one-on-ones. And that's where I'm thinking, like, you trick this freshman quarterback into, one-on-one. I've got to throw the ball. I got to throw it deep and maybe create those turnovers, that opportunity for deflections or big plays, or just put the ball in the air for a while and see what happens. Because I'm going to trust Oregon's DBs against the receiving core that Minnesota has. They don't have anybody that really can, outside of maybe Jalen Smith, a freshman receiver. He's averaging like almost 20 yards a catch, but everybody else just doesn't feel all that dangerous. And everyone feels like kind of a possession receiver. And it's almost like load the box, dare them to throw the football, and trust your secondary that's been elite pretty much all year to do his job.
Yeah.
And if Minnesota is struggling to be able to threaten deep, that allows Oregon's secondary to play aggressively, to be able to get up and press and not worry about getting beat over the top. You means your safeties can undercut things. You can be more aggressive in coverage and then, have those opportunities to force a turnover like that.
I'm with you, Matt, that Smith feels like the name to watch. He's not their most productive receiver. I think he has 15 catches, but they've almost gone for 300 yards. That is their big play threat. He's got some wheels. That's just a guy to be mindful of. They dial up shot plays for him. The other two receivers, Brockington and Tracy, are like you said, more possession guys. Like ADOT's under 8 or 9, I think, for both of those guys. So that's kind of the personnel thing. And to your point, Matt, I mentioned on offense, like it'd be good to have a kind of a breakthrough or kind of a bounce back for Dante Moore. I think for this defense, we bring up Mateo's name every week. It's not even just him, but just to have that kind of game where they really are impactful in the passing game. This is the number 13 team in the Big Ten in sacks right now. Haven't really had a game. And again, some of this has been, weather's been so bad, it's just kind of limited the opportunity recently. But if this is a game where we know Lindsey's going to have to shoulder the load, like get home a little bit, like to your point, like load up. And to John's point, play some press, make it a physical game at the line of scrimmage, win those battles. You've got the better athletes up front and kind of have that bounce back, because again, you want to build some of that confidence. I'm not saying this defense is like, doesn't think they can do it, but there is something psychologically, because we all know from even playing sports at our much lower levels, once you, like when Matt goes out and golfs at 78, he goes out the next time feeling like he's going to golf a 78 again.
Right? Sign me up.
Sign you up. Yeah, sign Matt up for a 78 every week. And then one of the things, just to kind of move to the other component of the offense for Minnesota, when I was doing my summer, just kind of look ahead, I thought Minnesota had the second best rush tandem on Oregon's schedule behind Penn State. Darius Taylor was back. He was the leading returning rusher in the Big Ten, had almost 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns. And they brought in A.J. Turner, a running back from Marshall, who was leading the country in yards per carry. I looked at that and said, hey, that's going to be something sneaky at the end of the season that maybe we're kind of overlooking. They're going to have this awesome running back duo that's going to be one of the better in the conference, maybe one of the better in the country if it all kind of like clicks. And because of injury, it hasn't clicked at all. Turner has been knocked out of the year. He was knocked out in non-conference play. Darius Taylor has been in and out of the lineup when he's played. He's been awesome. He's like 2 games over 140 yards, but he's only finished, I think, 5 games all season. He's just been injury plagued, and we don't know if he's playing in this game either. That was something we asked Brian about earlier in the week was, is he going to play? And if he doesn't play, it comes down to Femi Ijaboy, which I think I got. I think that Ryan gave us some tips on the show on that one. And he's a freshman. He's big. He's physical. He's nowhere near as explosive as the other 2 guys. The other 2 guys are big time athletes at running back that can really hit some explosives. I don't know if Minnesota is going to have that explosive rush attack in play, and especially without Taylor. And again, that's where, like, to me, Oregon's rush defense, if it does its job and it shuts down the Minnesota rush offense, I just find it to be really difficult to expect Lindsey's going to have a ton of success. The counter, of course, is if they find something, if Taylor plays and now suddenly they have that rush component and they're able to hit some explosives, get the ball up and down the field, then that takes a little bit of the pressure off Lindsey to shoulder all the burden. But every week it's the case, but especially this week, it feels like if you have success defensively against this Minnesota rush offense that's really depleted and down some of its best players, that's going to make it really, really difficult. And aside from Lindsey just kind of, again, playing his best game of his college career against elite competition, it just feels hard to expect them to do a whole lot.
And again, you look at some of these toughest games for Minnesota. Iowa, they're less than a yard per carry. They don't run it well even against Purdue. They're 68 yards against Ohio State. They have not run it well since the start of Big Ten play. So even it's been hurt by injuries at times. They've been missing some of those running backs to limit that. But yeah, it's been a struggle. And if you can get Lindsey, like you said, into some of those 3rd and 10 situations, 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, and then you can let Mateo pin his ears back, I think that would be a good opportunity for him to be able to get a sack here, because I think there's a weakness, especially on this offensive line too, on that right side.
Is this offense for Minnesota worse than a Wisconsin?
Oh, don't you dare.
Or an Iowa? Like, I mean, you hear the stats and you're like,
I don't think Iowa's offense is that bad, actually.
I think it's worse than Iowa. Better, I think it's better than I think it's in between those 2.
Yeah,
I just wonder, like, maybe they're so just average in both areas, run and pass, that if you're Oregon, you can basically, anything's available. You can pressure, you can do simulated pressure, you can just drop 8 guys back and dare them to throw the football or to run the football, because they're not really good at anything in particular. Well,
statistically, Matt, this is the 16th best offense in the Big Ten, and Iowa was 17th and Wisconsin 18th. So this is like playing the Kurt Warner led Rams from the late 90s, early 2000s here. This is the greatest show on turf that Oregon is facing here based upon recent competition. Actually, it's kind of startling. I hadn't looked at that and realized that Oregon's played the 3 bottom feeding offenses consecutive weeks. That should allow this defense to feast a little bit, I think.
So as we've said, we probably jinxed it, and we're going to see Minnesota somehow roll up 425 yards total offense in this game.
Jeez.
All right, let's take a quick break, and we'll come back and dive into some prop bets and our game predictions. And welcome back to the Autzen Audibles podcast. I will let you guys start since I'm new to this. Yeah. So I'll pick up 3rd here on the run.
How about that? John Evans, like 5 more games of experience in the props that we've been doing than Matt Prehm somehow.
Locked in.
Just so Matt, I'll give you the lowdown here. We've went to the Twitter X machine, Blue Sky. We usually go to DuckTerritory's Duck Pond. I didn't end up getting around to doing that this week, unfortunately. But we're pulling props from fans, then we're gonna pick those as opposed to us coming up with them. So here's where we're starting with at Dylan A. Hoffman. Will Minnesota score double digits? I'll let you go first, John.
I think yes. I'll get into my score prediction later, but I got them with 10 points because I feel like Oregon just has a tendency to give up these late touchdowns to teams. So I think that could be a situation where it's like 40-3 at some point or something like that, and Minnesota scores a late touchdown to push it to double digits, but I don't think it would be more than 10 to 13 points.
I think it's going to be over. I think they're going to get more than 10.
I will go over. Minnesota's only failed to go over that twice. Oregon has now, I guess, this year allowed teams to score, or they've prevented teams from going over double digits 3 times: Wisconsin, Oregon State, and Oklahoma State. I don't think Minnesota is even remotely close to the level that those 3 teams are. So I'll say over.
Second one, here's a little two-parter from Mopar Duck. Over under 5.5 snaps for Eastu, and then over under 3.5 catches for J-Mac. That would be Evan Stewart and Jeremiah McClellan. I'm going to take the under on Stewart. I don't know if he's playing this week. I know there's been like rumblings, but there's been rumblings that could be coming for a while, and I don't know. I'm going to be conservative and take the under. That would be incredibly exciting to see him back, just to infuse a little bit of excitement in a pass attack that is, because of injury to other players, lacking it. But I'm going to take the under, and then over under 3.5 catches for J-Mac. I'll hit the over on that. I mean, especially if the weather's good and we think Dante's going to be able to kind of throw the ball a little bit against the secondary that's not very strong. I think people overlook, like, there was a stretch there from Indiana through, well, I guess you continue it, but he was the second most productive pass catcher in this offense from Indiana through Iowa. I know, like and it wasn't huge production. It was like, at most 40, 50 yards per game, but he's got a little bit of momentum. And there's a reason he was playing more snaps than Malik Benson going into this run. So I think, I'll take the over. I'm buying him being a little bit more involved in he has, and maybe it's a career day for Mr. McClellan. Yeah,
I'll go the same with you for Stewart, just because even if he does come back, I think it would probably be in a limited capacity at this point. And then same with McClellan. McClellan came off the field for 1 snap in that Iowa game. He was there, especially once things got limited in the receiver room. He is very much trusted out there. They trust him as a blocker, and I think I think that seems like reasonable. We've seen him in the last couple of weeks, 3 catches in that Wisconsin game, 2 in Iowa, but that was there's both of those games are in the weather conditions and stuff. So like you said, if Dante can get things going, I think McClellan could be his guy because he's going to be on the field a lot in this game.
We'll also take the under for Evan Stewart. I just think, why rush him back for a short week? I understand he didn't play last week, but make sure he's got a full week of prep ahead of whenever he returns. My 2 would probably change if it was next week against USC. For J-Mac, 3.5 over, so that would be 4. That would be his career high in receptions.
It would.
He's done it twice with 3. I'm always hesitant to say yes to career highs being set, but because of the injuries to other guys at the position, Evan Stewart not playing, in my opinion, the weather being opened up, I'll probably say yes as well. I think that one would hit. He could probably have a good chance at a career high.
A little clean sweep there for us on that one. All right, third one from at M777. I don't know what that means, but letters and numbers. Over under 1.5 turnovers for the defense. Because of how susceptible Lindsey was at turning it over against Iowa, I almost kind of want to zag and say he's going to be like almost too careful in this game in terms of just like throwing the ball not into jeopardy, like just being really careful. I also think Oregon has been kind of hunting the ball. And this last game against Iowa, Gronowski didn't throw any interceptions, but Brandon Finney put his helmet on the ball a couple of times, knocked it out. So I will take the over, but I could also see this being a 1 or 0 turnover game. just because I don't know if I'm expecting Lindsey's going to play a little better than people maybe anticipate, and it'll at least just be a focus for him to protect the football. We'll see if he can actually do it.
I'll go over as well. I think an interception is certainly on the table for Lindsey. And then, like you said, I think this team has been hunting those fumbles. You can see every time they're getting in there, punching at the ball. And Oregon's done a good job at generating turnovers this year in general. The only game they haven't had a turnover was the season opener. And they've been able to generate multiple, especially against some of these weaker offenses. So I think only 1.5. I think you get 2 for sure.
Yeah, 2 of the last 3 games, Oregon's defense has had multiple turnovers. 3 at Rutgers, 2 at Iowa. They had 1, like John said, against Wisconsin. They also had a stretch where they had back-to-back games with 2 against Oklahoma State and Northwestern. So I'll say yes as well. Don't know if it's going to be an interception or fumble, but opportunities will be there. So they'll take it. I'll take the over.
And I'm really curious to see. We've been like all hive minding so far. Will we be on the same foot here with this one from @Coach Doherty, over under 250 yards passing for Dante Moore? It's a tough one. I think the number feels a scotch high, but I also think if I'm going to go under. I think for a couple reasons. It feels a little bit high. It also feels like this could be a game where Oregon separates early enough where he's just not asked to throw the ball a ton in the second half. And shoot, maybe it's a Brock Thomas takes Eugene by storm again, and we see a lot of Brock in the second, which would make the fans thrilled, I'm sure, to see more of him. But yeah, I will take the under on this one, I think.
Yeah, Dante's only actually hit this mark 3 times on the season at Oklahoma State game, the Oregon State game, and then the Rutgers one a couple of weeks ago. He didn't even do this at Penn State when everyone felt like he had a really good game. Exactly. But that said, I think I will go over. I think it will be right around that 200 range. I think 200 to 275. I think that just to kind of get some confidence for him, I think they could look to even leave him in there a little bit longer in this game instead of going to a Brock Thomas in the fourth quarter.
I'll take the over. Maybe half class full kind of guy. This offense needs a strong performance throwing the ball through the air. And I wonder if maybe they will force feed that a little bit just to kind of build some confidence up, put some stuff on tape with some new guys. They're having to play a lot of what they can do to force other teams to prepare for it. So I'll take the over 250.
All right. Last one here from @the Josh Burks. Pretty straightforward. Over under 3.5 offensive touchdowns. Taking the over. We'll do score predictions in a moment. I would be, I think, moderately concerned depending upon the why if the under hits. If this is a game where Oregon scores like maybe let's say 27 points, I'm not like hugely concerned. And again, there could be scenarios where you can explain that away of like maybe none of the receivers are back and they suffer another, knock on wood, injury, and it doesn't feel like there's anything in the past game. Dante doesn't throw for a lot of yards, and you go, okay, I kind of understand that. I just think against this defense, there's reason, and the track record in their games against better opponents is there's a lot of points scored. So I'll take the over on this.
Yeah, I'll also go with the over. I think Oregon 4 touchdowns should be at least what Oregon should be looking to get to in this game, especially against Minnesota, who has given up some pretty explosive scoring games to the better teams they faced this season.
Oregon's only scored 4 touchdowns, offensive touchdowns, in one of its last 5 games.
Yep.
That was the game at Rutgers. Didn't do it against Penn State, didn't do it against Indiana, didn't do it against Wisconsin, and didn't do it last week at Iowa. That trend will end. I think Oregon scores 4. Will it be 5 or more? That would be a really hard one for me to say yes to.
Those are the props, Matt. Let's do predictions.
Perfect. Let's go John first.
All right. I'm going to call it 38-10. I think Oregon, I think Dante Moore, a big bounce back game for him. I think he can get into that, over 250 yard range and then, pounding the ground game. I just don't think this Minnesota team is going to threaten Oregon, especially on defense that much. I think they can get a field goal early at some point and then maybe punch in a touchdown late if they get a coverage bust, which tends to happen to Oregon in the fourth quarter at this point. But I think Oregon should soundly handle this team, and you should be looking to have a similar performance to what Iowa did to them and what Ohio State did to them.
I got a similar score. I've got 35-13 Anticipate the offense has a get right game based upon standards and expectation. I think the offense has performed fine in certain facets recently, given the weather. I think you're going to see a lot of rushing yards in this game. I do. I know Minnesota's, that's the better part of their defense. I'm starting to believe, based upon what I'm seeing from this line and then these 3 running backs, that there's just something special brewing there, and that they may be kind of immune to, unless you're one of the elite defenses in the country, they're just going to churn out yards. I think they'll get over 200 yards for the 4th straight game. I think Dante does have a bounce back. I don't have him going over 250. I think we throw over 200, which again, that would be aside from Rutgers, like the third time he's done that in conference play. I think did it against Penn State. I can't remember if he did it against Northwestern. You guys can correct me on that.
Yeah, I think he did.
He did it against Northwestern.
Oh wait, no, he had 178. I have the game log pulled up here.
So yeah, it would be the 3rd time over 200. I think he does it, and I think the defense here we kind of explained all the reasoning during our breakdown before the break. I think there's going to be an inability for Minnesota to run the ball. I think it's going to put a lot of pressure on the young quarterback. I think he's going to have some moments, and that's how I have them getting to 13, where you're like, oh, there he is. This is the guy that the Gopher fans are excited about and encouraged about what the future will look like. But I just don't expect these teams are going to be competitive. And I think this is a game where if they want to, they can start playing a lot of their reserve units by the middle of the 3rd quarter.
I look at this game and see a lot of comparisons to the last time. I think, if I recall correctly, the last time Oregon played on a Friday night, especially in the Big Ten. That was on the road at Purdue.
Yep.
And
right.
Was the Michigan State game last year after that?
That's a good point.
I honestly don't remember in order.
It was a Friday game. They had 2 Friday games.
Purdue was after Michigan State. Michigan State was like the 2nd conference game after UCLA and right before Ohio State.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
But I think this game resembles a lot of Purdue from last year. Maybe Minnesota's a better program. Well, they are probably a better team than that Purdue team was.
They have 6 wins. They're okay.
I think this game will play out, though, in a similar manner where Oregon kind of dominated in the first half. They got out to a really big lead. And then the second half, it was just bleed the clock, get out of here, move on with your day. I think Oregon won that one at Purdue like 38-6 or something. It was some strange.
It's 31-0.
It was a shutout.
Yeah, 31-0. So like, and I want to say like they maybe scored once in the second half. I feel something very similar to that, where Oregon's going to get out to a really big lead in the first half. The starters will play to start the second half, but eventually they'll get pulled. Both teams will kind of run the football, milk the clock, get it out of here. Minnesota will tack on maybe a late score in this game, and Oregon walks away with like a 38-17 victory. But this is one where it's not going to surprise me in the slightest if it's 28-3 at halftime, and Minnesota maybe outplays them 14-7. That's just because their starters are in and Oregon's their backups are in.
So John's the only one with the cover. John, optimist John, glass half full John.
I just think this could be a spot where I just think they could want to build some momentum for Dante Moore and feel like over these last couple of games, as you head into, Mayava and Damon Williams are going to throw for 250 yards on you probably, or at least try to in these last couple of games. You're going to have some passing offenses you're going to have to face. So I think just building some confidence for Dante Moore as you head towards that postseason.
And I 100% am behind that. And I would not be surprised in the slightest, even though I'm predicting a really 18-point margin of victory here. Like, I would not be surprised if Oregon wins this game by 36. Like, they just come and just blow the doors off Minnesota. They play angry, and they, like to John's point, they open things up and build some confidence to the pass game. That will not surprise me in the slightest. I want to see it before I actually predict it to actually happen.
And we want to know, like, we don't know what the personnel at receiver looks like. I think if they had all 100%. Their dudes, I think that's If they had all their dudes, I'd be saying this could feel, and this is going to sound disrespectful to Minnesota, which is again is 6-3 and bowl eligible compared to Rutgers, which could get to bowl eligibility. Actually, they've won a couple of games, but if they had all their weapons, there would be more confidence in like oh my
100%.
gosh, they're going to hang 49 on these guys and they're going to get to 550 yards of offense or something like that. But because they don't have some of those guys, I'm wary of them quite being that dominant. But I just think there is a baseline for this offense with the run game right now that puts it above a threshold where, again, unless you're playing against some of these elite defensive fronts, and Minnesota's is solid, I'm not sold that they're going to struggle that much.
I'd argue, I know it doesn't work this way from like a Vegas point line perspective, but I think if you added Sadiq and you added DeCorian to this offense, either one of them individually, it almost feels like 6 more points could be added to Oregon's score. Like if they both play, like you could conceivably tell me that Oregon comes close to 50 in this game.
Yeah. No argument for me.
All right, it's going to do it for us here on the Autzen Audibles podcast. Thank you for listening to the show. Thank you for submitting the prop bet questions. Next time you hear from us will be Friday night, Saturday morning, depending on how late the game goes for a post-game recap. But until then, you've been listening to the Autzen Audibles podcast.
Talk to you later, folks.